will bring us a good dosage, I'm certain, of this inspiration. It is my great privilege to present to you our beloved head of the cause, Mr. Faizi, who will speak to us on the journey of Baha'u'lláh to the Holy Land, fulfillment of prophecy. Excuse me, I will deprive you just a few moments of Mr. Faizi's words. Mr. Furutan wishes to say something with reference to the cablegram in Persian for the Persian friends.
Mr. Faizi.
Beloved friends, the glorious Son of Truth, rising from his homeland, going through years of his banishment, he reached the summit of his glory and majesty in Adrianople, the land of mystery. As Baha'u'lláh rose in his power and grandeur, believers from all walks of life abandoned their homes and sought haven and shelter in his nearness. These believers, when faced with tests, trials, and ordeals, rather than renounce their faith, the true companions of Baha'u'lláh contented themselves with the bare necessities of life, intensified their spiritual fervor, welcomed any calamity in its path, and through the sweat and strain of suffering offered their very lives as humble tokens of love at the sacred altar of the Lord of the Dead. There were also those who, immersed in the trivialities of life, unmitigated in their hatred and jealousy, enslaved by their own corrupt desires, assisted by the persons who were drunk with pride and power, arose with all their energy, evil, and bitterness of their sinful soul to challenge the nascent and already vigorously growing faith of God. The devastating effect of such deeds created clouds of suspicion, hatred, and wrath that dimmed the radiant flame of the greatest name in Turkey. Never should we think of Baha'u'lláh as one amongst many. Though he appears in a physical human temple, he remained always far above, immersed immeasurably far above the reach and ken of men. No tempest could move the hem of his garment. No wave of calamity could ever sprinkle a drop in his serene presence. How can mortal man ever cover the face of the sun with the veil of his evil plotting? Nay, the sun shines above all clouds and eventually disperses them. So was to be the destined mission of the ancient beauty throughout his eventful life. Though sorely tried, he remained lofty and unshaken. Though relentlessly calumnied, he was never resentful nor vindictive. The evil deeds of the world could never be commensurate with his intense longing to save the children of men, to redeem their souls, and to put them on the right path to God. No ingratitude, no lack of virtue could minimize his love. No depth of infamy would prevent the seemingly hopeless and unrepentant humanity from receiving the open treasures of his clemency and compassion. In the innermost shrine of his own being, Baha'u'llah always remained calm and serene. He continued emitting rays of his redeeming light through the cloud of accumulated vice which has covered the sin-stained souls of men. With these thoughts in mind, let us review the events that mark the different stages of the end of Baha'u'llah's banishment from Adrianople to the fortress of Akka. The whole history of this period will be divided into the following topics. The latter days in Adrianople. Second, events immediately before his departure. Third, his departure to Gallipoli. Fourth, Smyrna, where Munib offered his life as sacrifice. Alexandria, where Nabil, the historian, had been imprisoned. Touching the shores of Haifa, touching the shores of the Holy Land for the first time by the promised one of all ages. And the last day is when he enters his prison in Akka. I hope you will have patience now to go through all these steps slowly and gradually with me. During the last days of Baha'u'llah's stay in Adrianople, the enemies of the cause, within and without, became bitterly against him. so much so that they tried everything to do something that Baha'u'llah would not stay in Turkey. One of the things they did was to write letters to representatives of the people, to the ministers of the court, to the prime minister, reporting against Baha'u'llah, telling them that Baha'u'llah, though a prisoner in Turkey, has reached such a summit of glory and might and power that he has allied with Bulgaria and has prepared a great army to attack the country of Turkey, and in a definite date he has in mind to come and conquer Constantinople. Along with these letters went to the houses of these people women folk from the houses of the enemy, complaining against Baha'u'llah that Baha'u'llah did not give them enough to have their livelihood, out of which Baha'u'llah became extremely sad. All of a sudden, the whole condition in the court of Turkey was changed. At this time, the Persian ambassador, who was behind all these acts, took a chance and wrote letters to Iraq and Egypt and other neighboring countries, telling them they could do whatever they liked with the Baha'is of those days, because the Turkish government would no more protect them. Such a message relieved evil powers and forces in all these countries. In Egypt, 7 of the friends had been immediately incarcerated and sent into exile from Cairo to Sudan under the most crucial, the most atrocious conditions. In Iraq, suddenly the houses of the friends had been plundered, they had been captivated, and one amongst them all, who was more famous than all others, and who was shining like a star in the firmament of love towards Baha'u'llah, was Rasul. Rasul had been in Siyah, the same prison as Baha'u'llah, went to Adrianople after being released from prison, visited Baha'u'llah, was advised by him to go back to Iraq and stay, to do away with the poignant sorrow of his being departed from his beloved. He took upon himself to take water every day from the Tigris River to the house of Baha'u'llah and water the roses of his garden. One day, very early in the morning, when it was not very dark and were not very light, several people attacked him when he was carrying water to the house, stabbed him from all sides, wounded him severely. Being a very brave, courageous, and strong man, could disperse these people, reach the house of Baha'u'llah, watered the roses for the last time, and there and then fell down dead at the garden of Baha'u'llah. He offered his soul in the rose garden of love. Baha'u'llah admired his prays him in many chapters, consoles his family in the most beautiful terms, and above all, brought his nephew to Akka and gave him the charge of the pilgrim house. And this man was firm and steadfast in his service, continued this service in the days of Baha'u'llah, in the days of Abdul Baha, and even to the days of the beloved God. And he was the nephew of Rasul. And Abdul Baha advised the family of Rasul to have this name, Rasul, perpetuated in their own family. I'm sure some members of his family must be in this group. About this time, what happened in Adrianople? Still groups of pilgrims were going to Baha'u'llah. But Baha'u'llah was advising all those people who were around him to be dispersed, to go throughout country as pioneers and teachers and establish the faith of God in different countries. But at this time, three very important people arrived to Adrianople. First was Nabil, the great historian, who had been commissioned by Baha'u'llah to go on teaching tours in Persia, Iraq, and the neighboring countries. Second was Munib, who also was commissioned by Baha'u'llah to go on the same tours. And third was Nabil. Nabil was asked by Baha'u'llah to go to Gallipoli and wait for him. Nabil said, when I saw Baha'u'llah for the first time after my trip, I found him as if he was surrounded by the people from all sides, and everyone carrying swords and spears against him. I saw him as if he had been suspended between heaven and earth, and had no one to help him, no one to shelter him, except his most great branch, who like a monk was circumambulating the candle of the existence of Baha'u'llah perpetually. When Nabil reached the presence of Baha'u'llah, he immediately told him to go to Smyrna and bring the true brother of Baha'u'llah, Mirza Musa, who with the permission of Baha'u'llah had been living in another town. Nabil says, when I went to him and showed him the letter of Baha'u'llah and told him of the instructions of Baha'u'llah, Mirza Musa, the true brother of Baha'u'llah, immediately jumped up and said, the days of calamity are approaching, and in these days I should not be far away from my brother, and immediately made for Adrianople. As to the third one, Munib was very young, very handsome, accomplished in the arts of his day, as one of the best voices. He was the man who walked the whole distance between Baghdad and Istanbul on one side of the steed carrying Baha'u'llah on exile from Baghdad to Istanbul. Abdul Baha said he was walking on one side and I on the other. And many a night he used to sing songs for Baha'u'llah, and the bass of his beautiful voice would ring out throughout eternity in those days. But at this time, when he reached Adrianople, he had been taken with serious illness. And when Baha'u'llah looked at him, He said this most remarkable sentence: when the lover attains the presence of his beloved, he must detach from all else but the beloved. This was a language, a symbolic language, a mysterious language between the beloved and the lover, between Baha'u'llah and Munib. Munib in his heart had always been begging Baha'u'llah to accept him as a martyr, as a sacrifice for his cause. And when he heard this, he said, my request is accepted by Baha'u'llah. I will be a sacrifice. We will come to his story after some moments. Now, as I said before, those letters and those people going to the houses of the ministers did everything. And suddenly, the captain of Turkey became against Baha'u'llah. One day, the friend had been taken as captain in Adrianople, and guards were installed around the house of Baha'u'llah. Defended Baha'u'llah everywhere. He said all accusations are wrong. When he saw these conditions and found out that he could not do anything to help Baha'u'llah, he was even ashamed to go and see Baha'u'llah face to face. He left the whole thing and went away. First, some of the believers started with some requirements to Gallipoli. Within 1 week that Baha'u'llah had been prepared to go, rumors stood everywhere. The people said to the press, Baha'u'llah would be taken to one place, the family to another place, and the friends to the third place. And now these friends who have abandoned everything, and they wanted nothing except the presence, the nearness of Baha'u'llah, could not bear it. One night they were sitting and talking about how to remedy this situation. All of a sudden, from outside of the room, they heard somebody struggling for breath. They went out and found one of the purest friends, purest in deed and heart and soul, by the name of Nabil, had cut his throat with his own razor blade. What the friend did first was immediately to report to Abdul-Bahar. Abdul-Bahar came and saw the scene, sent for 2 people, first a surgeon and second a doctor. The doctor reached first, closed the sore, and made the man talk. And when the judge came, he said, why did you do that? He said, because they want to separate me from Baha'u'llah. I don't want to be alive if I am separated from him. This news spread everywhere, and the people from the government came and saw the situation, and then they announced, everybody will go with Baha'u'llah. 3 or 4 days he was all right. Baha'u'llah called him to his presence and told him, you must be patient, you must be contented with the will of God, and you must be sure that you will be with us wherever we go. Then he was happy. When everything was ready, Baha'u'llah sent Nabil to Egypt. He said, you go and stay in Egypt. He didn't want it. He wanted to be near Baha'u'llah. He said, I don't want you to be involved with the sufferings which are ahead of you. You go there. You obey. We went to Egypt, and after 1 week, he was imprisoned because he taught openly, and the present consul there was against him and put him in prison. And the prison room of Nabil was very near to the seashore. From there he could see the sea, the boat. After 1 week, At noontime, Baha'u'llah came out from his house to go on wooden carriages carried by horses and carts. Ambassadors of all countries who were in Adrianople came to Baha'u'llah and said, tell us just one word, and we will write to our government, and they will all stand for you, and will do away with this cruel treatment that you are bearing. He said, we will never go to anyone except God. There is no refuge for us except God. And he made them very happy and sent them away contented. When he came out of his house, he found crowds of people standing at the door weeping. One of them has written in his memoir. He says, on that day, it seemed even the walls, the doors, and windows had been weeping. They all came to Baha'u'llah, knelt in front of him, kissed his hand, many kissed his hand, and lamented the departure of Baha'u'llah. In this way, he left Adrianople for Gallipoli. In Gallipoli, when they reached there, the man who was coming with them, who was responsible for the prisoners, was named Hassan Effendi. He was changed then. He was changed to another person whose name was Omar Bey. And he came to the presence of Baha'u'llah to say goodbye and to apologize for these treatments. Baha'u'llah told him, you go to the cave and tell him that his country will be convulsed. Many parts will be separated from his empire. There is no end to difficulty that he will suffer. And tell him that it's not me who talks, it's God who tells him. Then he continues to tell him, it would be much better for him if he had gathered the divines of Turkey and would invite us there. We would bring our proof. If there was anything in our place that would create confusion in the country, then he was right to treat us like this. But this that has been done is following the evil plot of the people who do not want anything but their own desires. And the rulers of the world must not follow this type of government. "72 people accompanied Baha'u'llah on this banishment. And these 72 people were crowded in the boat. And Baha'u'llah reached the boat in Gallipoli and was sitting in a chair, the rest in a room. And one of the companions said, we were so hurriedly taken to the boat that none of us thought of provision. Only one of us had some loaves of bread and some pieces of cheese. That was all we had during this strenuous journey from Gallipoli to Alexandria, to Smyrna. Amongst these 70 people was Munib, the young man I told you about. Munib was so terribly taken with illness that the 3 or 4 people carried him on board the ship. He could not walk. His illness became worse and worse as the boat moved from Gallipoli to Smyrna. In Smyrna, the captain of the boat insisted that Munib should be taken out. When they told him he could not walk to the place where Baha'u'llah was sitting, he dragged himself to the presence of Baha'u'llah. He fell down on the floor and kissed the feet of Baha'u'llah and wept bitterly, so much that Baha'u'llah was extremely sad. But these two did not talk to each other, the lover and the beloved. Everything was taught in the word of heart and soul. Munib understood. Munib was sure that his life was accepted by Baha'u'llah as a sacrifice. Therefore, he dragged himself away, and Abdul Baha, with some others, took him to a hospital in Smyrna. They put him in bed. They were forced to go back to the boat. And when the boat started sailing, after 2 days, Munib gave his life. And he was accepted as a martyr in Baha'u'llah. The boat sailed towards Alexandria, where they had to change boats. Here, one of the most miraculous episodes of the life of Nabil took place. Nabil, being in prison, found a Christian priest. He taught him the faith. And this priest became very much intoxicated with the love of Baha'u'llah. And he was telling him how happy you are that you have seen Baha'u'llah, but I have never seen him. One day, as Nabil was sitting alone at the window of his prison, he found one of the friends who was the chief steward of the household of Baha'u'llah passing in the street. This is where the miracle stopped. Nabil called him. He said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "Haven't you heard that Baha'u'llah is taking his life?" He said, "No, that this is his demon over there. Baha'u'llah is there, and I'm here to get some provision for Baha'u'llah, and I'm going back to meet him." At this time, that Christian, new believer came and found Nabil drowned in tears. Said, "What's the matter?" He told him the whole story. Now this new believer became worse than Nabil, because he desired to go to the boat and see Baha'u'llah. But being in prison, it was not possible. Then he said, "Let's write letters." They both wrote letters. Nabil said, "But who will send? Who will take this letter?" He said, "We will find something." When the letters were written and sealed, that Christian new believer saw one of his friends passing by in the street by the name of Constantine, the watchmaker. As if he was destined to see Baha'u'llah. He told him, "There is a man on board, and we have written letters. Could you take it for us?" He said, "By all means." They went on the roof of the boat and found this man sitting in a small boat, small sailing boat, to reach the steamer in the middle of the ocean. Before the sailing boat reached the steamer started to go away. Nabil and his friends again were very sad. They thought that their letters also could not reach Baha'u'llah. But suddenly they found the steamer stopped. The boat reached. And after some hours, Constantine came back with the parcel in his hand, and he was shouting, "I saw God. I saw the Father. I saw the Father of Christ." And the parcel was sent by Abdul Baha. It was containing some perfume, flowers, and a tablet from Baha'u'llah. The letter of this Christian is very, very interesting. He first praises Baha'u'llah as the glory of all glory, the exalted of the most exalted one. And then he expresses his loneliness, his grief, that he could not see Baha'u'llah. Then he addresses Alexandria, says, "Why are you so sad, O Alexandria?" He says, "I know because your Lord is departed." Then he addresses the city of Akka. He says, "Oh, the most dilapidated city of the whole world. What have you done that you should be the throne of the Lord of the dead? I see you clapping and dancing of joy. And he goes on to say things like that, and towards the end, he asks Baha'u'llah to enable him to serve his cause and to accept him and his family as the truest servant of the faith of Baha'u'llah. They changed boats in Alexandria with great many difficulties and continued to go to Haifa. In Haifa, also a great rumor started to spread amongst the friends which created another difficulty. They said from Haifa, Baha'u'llah would be taken to one place, Yahya and his brother would be taken to Cyprus, and the followers would be taken back to Persia. And some of the friends were actually taken to be sent with Yahya to Cyprus. One of them by the name of Abdul Ghaffar, when he saw the officer coming, dragging towards the boat taking him to Cyprus, he went on the top of the boat and shouted, Ya Baha'u'lláh, and threw himself down into the sea. Baha'u'lláh was very sad at that time. He called the officer responsible and said, because of your cruel decision, such things happen. You must send people and save this man. They brought him back. But again, very cruel, they took him to Cyprus with Yahya. But this man did not stay there. After some months, ran away from Cyprus and came back and lived under the shelter and mercy of Baha'u'llah all his life. And the last stage of Baha'u'llah's journey, it seems, was the most difficult. Though the distance between Haifa and Akka is very short, the day was extremely hot, and the boats were not moving very swiftly. It took them 8 hours to cross the little bay of Akka, from Haifa to Akka. And there was no shade for the people to be under the shade against the burning rays of the sun. And especially the women folk who were in bays, it had been extremely difficult for them. But for the first time, the Holy Land was blessed by the advent of the Lord. So much promised by all the prophets of the past. What the prophets of the past had said about the little town of Akka always amazed the scholars, historians, and those who were well versed in tradition. They said, what is it in this little town that should have been so much described that Akka would be the valley of hope for all the nations of the world, that the city of Jerusalem and the near places would be blessed by God, would be abundantly blessed by God. What is it that would join the two cities of Akka and Haifa? That all these things came to be manifested after Baha'u'llah entered. Now, dear friends, after the lapse of 1 century, 100 years ago, exactly in these days, the boat of Baha'u'llah was passing, crossing the same Mediterranean Sea. It has been blessed by the existence of supreme manifestation of God on the waters of this Mediterranean Sea. Now we are celebrating that great event after the lapse of 1 century. We can stand in the precincts of the fortress where Baha'u'llah has been imprisoned. We can gaze at the doors and windows of his prison cell. when we go there, please let's remember the dauntless pilgrims who crossed deserts, mountains, valleys on foot, with the sole aim of beholding the countenance of their beloved. But when they reached those shores, some were forbidden to enter. Few could go in, but were not allowed to cast their eyes on his face. And fewer still could only see his hands coming out from those famous windows. They saw little. They received physically less, but were so imbued with the spirit of pilgrimage that they returned home and consecrated their lives to the service of the cause of Baha'u'llah. And they brought the cause as a precious trustee and gave it into our hands today. What we have is the result of the martyrdom, of the troubles, of the cruelties that they bore. Let's have this precious trust very dear in our hearts. Now let's ask ourselves, where are the caliphs, the sultans, the ministers, and their officers who, hand in hand, and with all their material forces, tried to exterminate the faith of God? Where are they? We see with our own eyes that the dazzling light of their vanishing glory have long been extinguished. Their commanding voices have been sealed by the ignominious death they all suffered. Forsaken and forgotten, they are buried in the ruins of their own schemes, intrigue, and plot. Then once more we remember the sweet and assuring words of the beloved Master, uttered in the darkest hours of his precious life, when he said that all the plans made by the enemies of the cause would eventually prove to be nothing but painting on water. Then we behold, as we stand near the prison fortress of Baha'u'llah, then we behold the all-conquering figure of Baha'u'llah emerging from the midst of myriads of crises and of evils, like a beautiful silhouette against the sky, above, far above the reach of men. We can still see the touch of his hand. His hand which is raised to wipe our tears, to touch our fever-laden brows, to comfort our suffering hearts, to assuage our pain, and to give reassurance to our struggling souls. Let us renew the pledge of love and devotion we made to such a compassionate Lord, and decide to return home with unflinching determination. Let's also remember that from the very same Holy Land, only 12 people in the days of Christ started off to be dispersed throughout the world, and they had the world, the whole world, in their hands. Now think, when thousands of Baha'is, after 2 weeks, will be dispersed from that Holy Land, from the prison city of Baha'u'llah, if we are determined to renew our pledge with Him, what will happen in the world? Let's disperse, yet united in our aim and welded together in His love. Let's take our places in the rank and file of the army of life, and with a powerful and animated spirit, raise the cry of Ya Baha'u'lláh in all kinds, countries, lands, and plains, and on all the seas and mountain tops, undaunted by the overwhelming tragedies of the world around us. Let's tread the path of love and sacrifice, looking forward for the advent of that promised dawn, when the world will bathe in the light and warmth of the Sun of Truth, shining with all its God-given splendor, when man can live in abiding peace and unity, and when the earth will become the true mirror of the Abha King. Allah.